This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jennifer LaGrassa. Katarina is away. We begin tonight with an exclusive story. An internal investigation obtained by CBC News found that Windsor's police chief did make racist comments about Black people. CBC's Jason Vio reports.
An internal investigation into allegations that Windsor's police chief made several racist remarks is finished, and I've obtained and verified an internal document that shows those claims were found to be true. According to the internal summary, the investigator found Chief Jason Belair believed it was, quote, a safe space when he made those comments. Therefore, all of this does not amount to a poisoned work environment. The summary doesn't indicate what allegations were substantiated. Now, I first obtained a detailed list of those allegations through a human rights Tribunal of Ontario complaint filed by Ed Armstrong last year. He's an inspector, the first Black officer to reach that rank. In his human rights complaint, he indicated he also filed an internal one, which we now know has been substantiated. Here's what Armstrong said Belair told him while the two were at work, according to his human rights complaint. Belair asked him to use his black magic to ease criticism of a local university professor, referred to her as a Black radical, suggested there is telepathic communication among Black people, said he preferred whiter things, mentioned needing a Black friend to accompany him to certain events. Armstrong also said Belair made a joke about Black people and bananas. Armstrong hasn't responded to CBC News. Belair also has not returned our calls or emails. When asked in an email to confirm whether the allegations against Belair were substantiated, Windsor Police spokesperson Gary Francoeur said the information in your message is not entirely accurate. However, as the matter is still before the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario, we cannot comment further at this time. But he refused to clarify what information he claims to be not entirely accurate. Now that the allegations have been substantiated, the Windsor Police Association tells CBC News it's wondering how the board will hold the chief accountable, but we may never know. When asked about possible consequences, the board administrator says they don't comment on personnel matters. Plus, last month, the chief announced he will be retiring in November, 2 years before the end of his 5-year contract, and he didn't provide a reason for that decision. Jason Vio, CBC News, Windsor.
Turning now to an unusual sight at Windsor's riverfront. There in a pile on the ground is the massive Canadian flag. It's usually atop the flagpole there at the foot of Riverside Drive and Olette Avenue. Workers were later seen putting up the smaller flag in its place. In an email, the City of Windsor said this is the first time this has happened and they are investigating. They say the brass rings on the flag were damaged. Usually they're able to repair it. The city says it expects to put the big flag back up this week as early as tomorrow. The damaged flag almost seems emblematic at this time, given the bruising Canada's taking in the current trade war. Ford City is hosting a lively St. Patrick's Day crawl today. So there's been plenty of live music, laughs, and of course, some pints. The party has been rocking over there since 11 this morning, and the plan is to keep that going until about 10 tonight. Colette Kennedy is here. Colette, definitely a different vibe out there compared to the weekend. What are our partygoers looking at?
Yeah, well, we're looking at, in terms of the sky conditions, dry conditions for us, but we do have somewhat cooler air in place than certainly what was in play on Saturday. But it's going to warm back up again. And the reason being, well, you see the snow up here into northern Ontario. That's a trough. But this, which is coming towards southwestern Ontario, that's a warm front, another warm front in here. So we've got the winds coming from the north. They're going to change around to a more southerly flow. As that happens, our temperatures will be warming. So tonight, 1 degree just after midnight, then the temperature rising towards the morning, and by afternoon, up to 16 degrees.
I love to hear it. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
If you're an auto worker, how you feel about tariffs may depend on which side of the border you're on. In Canada, the union representing auto workers has come out strong against tariffs. But on the American side, the union is pro-tariffs. Emma Loop looks at this great divide and how it's come to be.
I'm Emma Loop with CBC Windsor, and I'm going to explain what might be fueling the UAW's position supporting Trump's tariffs. On the surface, it seems like a surprising split for two unions with decades of shared history. The UAW, which represents thousands of auto workers in the United States, has come out in favor of President Donald Trump's tariffs against Canada and Mexico. Unifor, its Canadian counterpart, sharply disagrees and has called the UAW's position naive.
And from the perspective of the impact of these tariffs, not just on Canadian auto workers, but on U.S. auto workers as well.
According to experts I spoke with, decades of job losses in the U.S., America's shifting politics, and changes within the UAW might help explain why they've taken such a different position here. The union did not respond to repeated interview requests, but experts have offered some theories. First, you have to go back in time to understand some of the history at play here. American and Canadian auto workers were once both represented by the UAW. Starting in the 1930s, workers in Windsor and Detroit started staging sit-in strikes to fight for better working conditions and more pay. And it was out of those strikes that the UAW and its Canadian regional office were born.
From the beginning, the UAW was an international union. But there were always tensions, and the tensions had to do with this is a different country.
Those tensions reached a crescendo in the 1980s. The American leadership of the union wanted to take a more concessionary approach to bargaining with the auto manufacturers who were facing global competition. The Canadians, however, did not want to do that, and out of that, the CAW was born. Some experts say that NAFTA naturally created tensions between auto workers because auto workers in Canada, the US, and now Mexico were fighting against each other for jobs. Some production did end up moving south, and with the rise of automation, a lot of traditional assembly line jobs were replaced by robots and machines.
It's a free-for-all, and in free-for-all, workers rarely come out ahead.
The result is a weaker UAW. Membership sits at just under 400,000 people, a sharp decline from the 1.5 million members it had in the 1970s. The UAW has experienced some other big changes recently. Before, a smaller group of elected officials would choose the president themselves, and they returned to a system where each member had a vote.
The UAW had a kind of a revolution in the U.S. The concessionary leadership was overthrown. It was seen to be corrupt.
The result was the election of Shawn Fain, who has quickly transformed the union back into the UAW of decades past, which was much more aggressive towards the companies.
All we want is our share of equity. We're not asked to be millionaires, and this choice is clear.
He then became a very notable figure during the presidential election of 2024. He ultimately threw his support behind Kamala Harris. But Harris lost, particularly in former Democratic strongholds like Michigan, which are home to thousands of auto workers. Gone are the days of the so-called blue wall. Many auto workers have been drawn to Trump, who has promised to bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S. That means a good portion of the UAW membership supports Trump most likely, something that the leadership is likely very aware of. Trump and the UAW hope that these tariffs will force the auto manufacturers to bring jobs back to the United States. Industry experts say that would take billions of dollars and years to accomplish. And sure, the auto manufacturers make a lot of money, but do they make enough money to cover 25% or more tariffs on all the parts and vehicles crossing the border? Experts say they likely don't. The North American auto industry now has a highly integrated supply chain. Parts can cross the border several times before they are finally assembled into a vehicle. If a hefty tariff is applied each time, that means the cost of business rises exponentially. At a certain point, some experts said it could be days or weeks. The cost becomes too high for companies, especially smaller parts suppliers who don't have the same profit margins. If there aren't enough parts to assemble vehicles, then production stops. Similarly, the price of cars, because of the tariffs, would skyrocket, and that would likely lead to fewer sales. Without enough supplies or demand, plants shut down and workers lose their jobs.
The supply chain is so integrated that you can't just take it apart in a few days, a few weeks, 30 days. It's meaningless.
The head of Unifor, Canada's union, says she would prefer to see any sort of disagreements worked out in the renegotiations of the USMCA, which are scheduled to happen next year.
We are going to defend these jobs, and we're going to defend our plants, and we're going to defend our communities with everything we have.
That means stronger labor rights and minimum pay, so that the companies don't exploit places or regions with fewer protections. Other experts question how the UAW's position will play out.
This is a pretty awful step. Be interesting. Part of this is that where is he going to go?
Either Trump goes through with the tariffs and auto workers on both sides of the border face layoffs, something that the union doesn't want. Or Trump does as he's already done once before. He walks back the tariffs. And then what does the UAW do? Does it also walk back its position? Either way, one expert says that this represents a major break in solidarity between the two unions.
With a trade war souring long-standing relations with the U.S., more Canadians are wondering if the $19 billion purchase of American-built F-35 fighter jets can be stopped. Payment for the first 16 jets out of 88 has already been made. Prime Minister Mark Carney says his government is exploring potential alternatives.
Given the geopolitical environment, given the fact that there are options, given the need for value for money, given the possibility of having substantial production of alternative aircraft in Canada, as opposed to sending, as we have been, on average 80 cents of every dollar to the United States, it's prudent and in the interest of Canada to review those options, and that's what that's the process that the Defence Minister has initiated.
A routine dog walk turned frightening for a local teen. The 15-year-old girl was walking her 4-month-old French bulldog early Sunday morning when she was approached by 3 people. They threatened her with bear spray, then grabbed the dog and took off. This is Rustin. A 15-year-old girl was arrested in connection to his theft. Windsor police are looking for 2 other suspects. Now, this case does have a happy ending. Earlier this afternoon, Rustin was reunited with his family. Athletes from across Canada spent this weekend in Calgary taking part in a qualifying tournament for a rather unconventional sport. Here's a hint. It involves chainmail and swords. CBC's Brendan Coulter was on hand to take in the action.
Heavy metal swords crashed against helmets and shields at the Medieval Combat Team Canada qualifying tournament, with a trip to the World Championships in Houston, Texas on the line.
It gets pretty intense. I mean, if there's any time to empty that gas tank, it's now. And these guys are doing it. A lot of these guys are already exhausted, but they'll dig deep and they'll find something to make sure they get that spot on Team Canada today.
About 57 fighters showed up from places like Yukon and Saskatchewan. Samantha Julie made the trip from Vancouver Island.
The adrenaline rush is crazy. It's like hardcore butterflies, but it's so much fun. I love the sport. It's basically my life right now, besides my kids and my family, yeah.
Her brother Lucas Mendez captains the national team. He won Canada's first ever medal at the World Championships in 2023.
When you put that helmet on and it's just you and your opponent, it's hard to explain. It's just a completely different feeling, and it's a huge rush, especially when you start winning and you start going places.
And with more and more Canadians taking up the sport, it's getting harder to win battles and crack the national team roster.
I've been doing this 11 years. I have seen it go from a bunch of nerds in a park to now competing at Worlds with 35 official fighters, right? So, I mean, over the years, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Ames says a lot of the best fighters are coming out of the U.S., but that's slowly changing, and Canadians are starting to become serious contenders on the world stage. Brendan Coulter, CBC News, Calgary.
So as we know, it's St. Patrick's Day, and arguably no one celebrates the patron saint of Ireland quite like the Irish do.
It's great to see people of all different corners of the world getting together, celebrating Irish culture and being in Dublin all together. Nothing beats it.
Four-leaf clovers, leprechauns, and plenty of luck wove through the streets of Dublin as thousands gathered for the annual parade. While the day marks the death of St. Patrick, it has evolved into a celebration. We will be back very shortly for Canada's new Prime Minister is on his first international trip 3 days after taking office. Mark Carney is looking to bolster relations with Europe amid the trade war with the U.S. Rosemary Barton has more from London.
The first stop on his first official trip came at the request of Canada's Prime Minister. Notre Dame Cathedral rebuilt from the ashes, a symbol of resilience. And resilience is exactly what Mark Carney is trying to build in the face of economic and territorial threats coming from the U.S. And so a return to Canada's European allies. Prime Minister Carney said he was not seeking for them to stand up for Canada, but some support still came. French President Emmanuel Macron denounced tariffs and encouraged free trade.
Parce que nous avons la conviction, et je crois que nous l'avons en commun, que nous sommes plus forts ensemble.
We are better when we are together, he said, better able to ensure our respected interests and our sovereignty. Macron's words were supportive but careful. He, like other world leaders, walking a fine line to not raise the ire of the U.S. president.
Canada is a reliable, trustworthy, and strong partner of France. which shares our values and lives them through action during this age of economic and geopolitical crises.
It's a great treat.
The King, who has been under some pressure to publicly defend Canada, offered no such change in his position. And the British Prime Minister, too, has been criticized for not saying more about Canada.
The relationship between our two countries has always been strong, to sovereign allies.
The Prime Minister says he does have the support of Canada's allies.
Look, I don't think one needs to respond to every comment about another country. Look, we can stand up for ourselves.
This trip was also intended to send a signal to the United States. No longer a trusted ally, Canada can find friends elsewhere. But the Prime Minister still needs to speak to Donald Trump, and we're told that could happen as early as this week. Rosemary Barton, CBC News, London.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says that if elected, his government would cut the industrial carbon tax. He says it would make Canadian products more competitive, but experts warn the country would then have no chance of hitting its emission targets. CBC's Kate McKenna has the details.
Pierre Poilievre says if he's elected, all carbon pricing is on the chopping block.
Today I am announcing that a common sense Canada First Conservative government will repeal the entire carbon tax, including the federal backstop that requires provinces impose industrial taxes.
On Friday, Prime Minister Mark Carney said he'd kill the consumer carbon price. Now Poilievre says he'd get rid of the industrial price too.
There will be no taxes on consumers, no taxes on Canadian industries.
Most provinces have their own systems. Poilievre says they can keep them if they want. He also says he would expand eligibility for tax credits aimed at clean technology.
While the Liberals tax businesses who use energy, Conservatives will cut taxes and boost incentives for those who bring down emissions. Carrot, not stick.
But the Canadian Climate Institute says industrial carbon pricing is the biggest driver for reducing emissions.
If we got rid of the industrial carbon price today, our emissions would rise the equivalent of about 15 million cars. So yeah, we're not going to hit our targets if all the provinces and the feds get rid of it.
I would say it's bad economic policy for Canada. It's terrible environmental policy. I mean, it basically says let the big polluters pay, not pay. That they can actually pollute for free. And if you actually believe in climate change, it is important for us to actually take action. This is one of the key levers to do that.
Some business experts welcome the idea of more tax incentives.
The more predictability we have and the more incentives we have is a good thing. But of course, it's all about the details.
Poilievre says his plan would make business more competitive, but it could have long-term consequences. European countries are planning a tariff on nations that don't have carbon pricing, meaning companies could be forced to pay a carbon tax, but to a foreign government, not our own. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Do you have a story you think we should cover? We want to hear from you. You can reach us by text at 519-984-2051, or you can send us an email at windsor@cbc.ca. We're going to have your full weather forecast coming right up, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that. Colette Kennedy is back now for more weather. Colette, I've got a little St. Patrick's joke for you.
Okay.
Just, you know, with the weather getting nice out, I see people out again, so I thought this was a good one, okay? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
How does a leprechaun work out?
I do not know.
By pushing their luck. Pretty good. It's a pretty good one, right?
I would say I push my luck, I think, quite a bit, and it does nothing for me, but I'm glad it works for the leprechauns. I will share with you and everyone, our Irish viewers, that why are they so good? It is because they are born with a heart of gold. There you go. So, yeah, we both have a little bit of St. Patrick's themed information to share with you today. How about some information about your sunrise and sunset? Sunrise tomorrow is going to be at 7:38. Your sunset tomorrow at 7:42. And so our hours of daylight, there are now more than 12 hours of daylight, and we are approaching our vernal equinox on Thursday, the first day of spring. Here are your current temperatures: 6 degrees in Windsor, 7 in Sarnia, and then check out Goderich. Those winds are coming off the lake and right at freezing there. Chatham-Kent, the temperature cooler there too, of 2 degrees, and again more of a wind off the lake as well, having that impact. We do have a warm front incoming though, so cloud cover right here associated with that front. It's going to shift those winds around a little further, more of a southwesterly flow, and with that start to bring in some milder temperatures again. Maybe not quite as warm as Saturday, but I think we're going to be getting close over the next few days here. So we have mostly clear skies for tonight. That stays in place. Tomorrow we'll start off with sunshine. This is 7 a.m. and then some clouds will build into the afternoon hours, becoming more variable or kind of mix of sun and cloud. The clouds thicken up though into Wednesday, and it is later on Wednesday as we're getting towards Thursday that we're going to see some showers rolling on through, and that's going to be along the cold front. So the temperatures may dip just a little bit back down again as we're headed towards the end of the week. So overnight temperatures, 1 degree. This is at 1 a.m. Actually, by the time we get to 7 a.m., the temperature will start to creep back up again, so 2 or 3 degrees or so by early tomorrow morning. And then how about that high headed up to 16 degrees, Wednesday 19, Wednesday night into Thursday, those showers. Spring comes in at 5:01 a.m. and it will be a little bit cooler, but not too bad for us.
Super exciting. I'm looking forward to that 19-degree day, Colette. That looks lovely.
Doesn't it? Yep.
Thanks so much for this, Colette. Thanks,
You're
everyone.
welcome.
Hope you have a very good evening, and we'll see you here tomorrow.